So whether you're moving a flower, a vegetable, or a fruit, if it's a perennial, right now is when you want to move it. Now, the best time to move a perennial is in the fall, believe it or not, just after it goes dormant, because it's going to have the longest time to get established in the soil, kind of get acclimated to the new soil that it's being planted in without a whole lot of stress. But I know a lot of gardeners, they realize when they kind of change their garden around, I'm this way, I kind of replan my garden, and what was fine last year is no longer fine now. And so I find that springtime is when a lot of gardeners kind of change their plans around, and that's when perennials that were planted there become a problem. And so right now is the time when you're going to want to transplant them. You do not want to move them if there's already growth. You want to do it before the growth, because that growth is the energy coming from the roots that was stored from the year prior up into the new growth. And so you want to move your perennials when they still look like they might be dead. Now, when it comes to planting in my garden, I tend to usually use a lot of foresight to know if something is going to be a good location long term. But when it comes to this asparagus, I don't know what I was thinking. This actually could not be a worse spot for the asparagus, because not only is it super close to the edge of this raised bed where then it's going to want to kind of come out into the walkways, it's also really close to this red vein sorrel here. It's also kind of filling out and spreading like it wants to. That's going to be a problem. It's just not a good location. And so what we're going to do is we're going to dig this up. And there's nothing wrong with digging up perennials. A lot of people will say, don't ever dig up a perennial. Well, what happens if you're moving, right? My parents moved. They brought a bunch of heirloom plants that they had inherited from their parents and even their parents' parents that were just, they're generational plants. Nothing wrong with taking them with you. I know a lot of people take rose bushes that are sentimental and things like that. In our case here, I just don't want to kill off these beautiful asparagus plants, so I'm going to move them. But I don't want them right here. And so the best time to do it is when they're still dead. All this growth was last year's growth, and all that energy is still down in the roots. If they were starting to grow, you still could try to transplant them, but your chance of losing them or of causing damage that's irreparable becomes a lot higher. So I like to transplant them in early season before they start pushing that growth. So the first step, once you have kind of decided that you're going to move them, you've already committed to doing it, next thing you want to do is really dig a wide radius around the plants, because perennials, they naturally have very deep and wide root systems, and you're going to probably cut some, but you want to cut as few as possible because those roots have the energy that helps that plant come out of dormancy. And so what we're going to do is on asparagus, we're going to come out about, well, it's so close to the edge of this raised bed. Again, not a great location. Don't know what I was thinking, but we're going to come out about 8-10 inches away from this plant. And we're going to dig down quite deep as well, because perennials have those deep roots to get themselves established. And so we're going to kind of just work this soil around, and we want to basically make a plug that's going to have all those roots, or as many roots as possible, still intact. I can tell you I'm breaking roots, which I don't love. As long as you keep most of the roots and the crown intact, you should be fine. All right, here we go. And you can see, check this out, look at this. Some of these roots still intact, wonderful. I broke a few, but look at how deep these roots are. This is the top of the crown. This is all the roots that go down. Absolutely crazy. And you can see, these roots here, they won't do anything, they won't regrow. It's not like, they're not gonna start growing into another asparagus here. But we saved as much of those roots as possible and only broke a few, which is really good. All right, so we're gonna take this giant clod of soil, go take it over to our orchard where we're gonna be planting it. All right, so we dug our holes over here, and we're gonna be putting them in our orchard where these asparagus can kind of spread and sprawl, fill out, and they're also gonna get some nice shade during the summer from these trees once they're leafed out. But in the early season, when there's no leaves on the trees, we're gonna be getting asparagus. It's kind of one of our missions to kind of create almost like a food forest, if you will, right? We wanna incorporate that permaculture component so we can maximize how much food we're growing. And this is a way better location for these asparagus. So we're gonna take them and we're gonna pop them down in this hole here. Now, it is really important that when you're transplanting perennials, you wanna make sure that you have a really good soil that you're gonna move them to. Our soil here, we've been putting wood chips on this part of our orchard here for 7 years now. The soil is incredibly loose, incredibly rich, and as you go down deeper, you get into some clay, but for the most part, the majority of the soil here that these asparagus are moving into is very, very nice. So we're just gonna kind of get this positioned here. We're also planting it at the same level that we pulled it out from. That's really important that you don't raise it up or put it lower than what it was used to, because that can actually cause some problems as well. Planting it at the same level is super important. Now you'll also notice we didn't fertilize. You don't want to fertilize a freshly transplanted perennial. That goes for fruit trees like this peach, cherry, strawberries, any type of perennial. You want to wait about a month or 2 months before you actually start to fertilize. And the reason why is because there's gonna be a time when this plant starts to come out of dormancy where it's gonna focus on root development. And if you fertilize right at the source, what it's going to do, it's going to encourage a lot of that growth without encouraging a lot of the roots to move throughout the soil that you just transplanted into. Because remember, you moved it from one spot in your garden to another. It's never been in here before. It's never been to this spot of the garden. So it needs to learn to actually move throughout the soil and get reestablished. So don't fertilize right away. I would highly recommend it. You're gonna have way better success, and you're gonna have much stronger plants being transplanted. Another thing to consider is the time of day that we're doing this at. You really don't wanna do this during the heat of the day, when the sun's full blast. Sun and heat can actually cause a lot of stress on transplanted perennials. And so ideally you wanna wait until either early morning or late afternoon to move your perennials, so you're not gonna be stressing them out. Now, one good thing is the fact that they are still dormant. They're not full grown, right? If they were full grown, we'd have even more problems to worry about. Because they're still gonna be dormant for 3 or 4, maybe even 5 weeks, it really helps to kind of reduce that stress. But still, best practice is to move them when there's not as much sun and not as much heat. All right, let's go take this over, get it in the ground. All right. These are gonna be so much happier over here. So will I. I'll also be happier over here, having these out of the way, a little more protected from the fruit trees and the foliage that they'll create, and it'll create just more of an all seasons orchard. So I'm really happy with how this turned out. I hope you guys learned something. And the final thing I was mentioning, or going to mention I should say, is watering. You really want to make sure that you water these in well. I know in early season, it's easy for us to think, well, it's probably going to rain in the next day or two because it's the rainy season, so I'm just going to plant them and I won't water them. It's a big mistake, because what happens if it doesn't rain? Well, then they're going to dehydrate, and those root fibers that got cut are going to dry out. It's going to cause a lot of stress. So the best thing to do is, as soon as you transplant, water frequently. These are going to get water almost every single day for the first couple weeks. Then after that, we're gonna wait about 3 weeks and we'll water every other day. And then every other day, we'll go into about maybe once a week. Until those plants are fully established, starting to grow and showing no signs of stress, we're gonna make sure that we water, because watering is one of the biggest reasons why you'll lose perennials when they're freshly transplanted. That doesn't change just because it's asparagus. Like I said, it could be a fruit tree, a flower, a vegetable like this. It does not matter. Water, water, water. And so I hope you guys enjoyed. I hope you all learned something new. If you did, make sure to hit the like button. Subscribe if you haven't already. And as always, this is Luke from the MIgardener channel, reminding you to grow bigger. Take care. Bye.